Hello again. This is part 2. This will be basically talking about how group counseling and RPGs have some common ground, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. This video is going to talk about group dynamics and group process. Group dynamics. In addition to describing the interaction and energy exchange between members and GMs, group dynamics is also used to describe the forces that are operating in a group. These forces may be obvious or hidden. They include such things as how members talk to each other, how members feel about each other, how members feel about the GM, and how the GM reacts to the players. The important thing for the GM to realize is that when he is leading a group, there are things to attend to other than just the verbal exchange among members. Members want to, 1, to feel accepted by the group, 2, to know what is expected, 3, to feel they belong. Also, when these forces are not present, members will tend to be negative, hostile, withdrawn, or apathetic. A GM will often find that these forces operate in a positive way for the most, but not all of the members, thus creating dynamics that need the leader's attention. The GM can tune into some of the group dynamics by giving thought to the following questions. Do the players seem to like each other? Do the players seem to feel comfortable with each other? Do the players have a sense of belonging to the group? Do the players seem to know what is expected in the group? And these forces can either be positive or negative. Group size, session length, the setting that they're actually playing in, the level of goodwill, the level of commitment, the level of trust, members' attitude towards each other, members' attitude towards the GM's attitude toward the players, interaction pattern of members and the leader, the players and the GM, and the stage of the group. And I'm going to go through and talk about a little bit of these things. So group size, we've had some videos on this. Usually groups have from 5 to 8 members, but some of you have less, down to 2 or 3. Although there can be, that's what I just said. The size of the group can be a negative force. If the group is larger than it should be, given its purpose, the GM's preferences, the length of time for each session, and the needs of the players, individuals will become frustrated, and it will become a negative thing that happens in the group. And the group will be less interesting, and players will probably start to drop off. Groups that are too small, on the other hand, may cause members to feel too much pressure to participate. Since the size of the group can definitely affect the group dynamics, the leader should take care with the decision on how many people should be able to attend. Session length. If the group meets for too short a session, members may feel they did not get their chance to share in the process and be creative, and it just doesn't scratch the itch that they have. In order for members to feel invested in the group and in one another, enough time must be allotted for each session. This decision is normally left to the GM of the group. Sometimes the leader will delay his decision until the group has met for the first time to ascertain the various factors, the kind of group, the makeup of the players and membership, his own availability, and any setting constraints. That's basically, where you play your game. There may be times when the GM and the players decide to meet for an extended period, maybe 5 or 6 hours or 8 hours, or maybe even a whole weekend. Okay, the setting. There are a number of things to consider in reference to where the group meets. One is convenience. Is it suitably located? Members will tend to come regularly if the location is easily accessible and close to their, where they live. Of course, the choice of location is not always within the leader's control, but when it is, the convenience factor should be weighed. This is a good example. When I was hosting games, my location was central for most of the players, and attendance was higher because that was the case. When I could no longer host the games at my house, we went somewhere else, and some of the players dropped away because it was further for them to drive, and it just wasn't worth it for them. Another consideration of location is the privacy of the meeting room. Ideally, the GM will have a room that is closed to any other traffic during the meeting time. Sometimes, especially in such places as schools and institutions, this is not possible. I've known some players that, or some people that ran games in a college cafeteria, or even like a back room of the library. So you can really run games at various locations. Some other things that the GM needs to consider about the setting are whether the room is a comfortable one, what the wall decorations are like, what the lighting is like, and whether the seating arrangements and the chairs are comfortable and conducive for what you're trying to do. You know, if you're not comfortable, that's going to be a detriment. You might not enjoy yourself. In most group situations, it is best that the chairs not be lounge chairs, since members will tend to simply relax and not get involved in the process. You know, they might get sleepy. You know, things just like a good hard wooden, dining room table, would probably work best. Usually the best seating arrangement is a circle, but that doesn't really work for a lot of people if you don't have a circular table. Basically where all members can see each other. Things like long rectangular tables can work pretty well too, in my experience. Level of goodwill. One of the dynamics to consider when thinking about the members is the group's level of goodwill. By goodwill, we simply mean the members' attempts to be helpful rather than resistant, disruptive, or hostile. It stands to reason that a group made up of members with goodwill will be much easier to lead than one with members of little goodwill. Goodwill usually produces a high level of commitment. Members lacking goodwill are usually those who want to direct the group or have its undivided attention. Kind of like spotlight hogs we've talked about a little bit in the past. Some members will have little or no commitment to the group at all. How does a leader know if there is goodwill? The best way is to assess this is simply to observe your members. Simply ask them, what is your feeling about being in this group? Level of commitment. So basically, level of commitment is usually tied to its level of goodwill. When commitment is low, members will tend to get off track, show little interest, contribute very little, do disruptive things, argue with the GM, or attack each other player. Everybody else is at the table. In other words, all kinds of negative group dynamics will occur when there is little commitment. As a leader, you must expect to have difficulty if you are leading a group of members who are not committed. Level of trust. I don't know if this one isn't as much so, but I'm going to read it anyway. Many groups will start out having the positive dynamics of goodwill and commitment, but that does not mean that there is automatically a high level of trust. Only in groups in which the members already know and trust each other will the group start with a high level of trust. In groups of goodwill and commitment, trust will usually develop over time if the group is moving in positive direction. In groups of low goodwill and/or commitment, trust will rarely develop. Sometimes the lack of trust is due to one negative member whom other members feel will not, or basically will be very judgmental or critical. If someone is always tearing you down every time you open your mouth, you're not going to open your mouth as much. Some members may not like one another, or there may be some cliques that existed before the group started, and if you're not in that clique, you just don't, there's going to be problems. In almost any group, the trust level will increase or decrease as the group progresses, and it is important for the leader to pay attention to the evolving trust level. This increase or decrease is usually dependent on how the members are reacting to one another. Obviously, if members are being hostile or are saying things that put other members off, the trust level will be low. And this goes without saying, be nice to each other. You want the session to be fun. And if you're being made fun of every time you open your mouth, you're just not going to have fun, and probably eventually you're just going to stop coming. If the GM lets such statements stand without clarification, the members may have a tendency not to disclose for fear of being criticized. Throughout the life of the group, the leader, or GM, must monitor the trust level closely. For without a high trust level, any group will more than likely be difficult to lead. Players' attitudes towards each other. Another dynamic to be considered by the GM is how the players feel about each other. If the GM finds that she has members who simply do not care for one another, she will want to try to change this by meeting with them individually to see if their differences can be resolved, asking someone to possibly drop out of the group, or accepting the fact that she is going to have a difficult time ahead of her. And this uses the masculine and feminine, interchangeably, so expect that throughout. Members' attitude towards the GM. Certainly the attitude of the players toward the the GM has to be considered while leading any group. What do the players think of the GM? Do they like him? Do they respect him? Do they trust him? Do they respect his group leadership skills? In most groups, players will have a variety of feelings towards the GM. Sometimes all the players may have negative feelings about the GM. In such a case, the GM needs to examine this dynamic, since it may have something to do with his or her style and or experience as a leader. Often negative feelings are harbored by only one or two players, but one person who is out to quote-unquote get the leader can really interfere with positive group dynamics. The most important thing for the leader to realize is that negative attitudes about him as the GM most definitely affect the interaction in the group itself. And this includes anything from role-playing, stating your opinion about a decision that the group is trying to make, etc. GM's attitude towards the players. A dynamic that is often overlooked, but one of great importance, is the GM's attitude towards her players. Members who have no goodwill or commitment may devote their entire time to disrupting the session. It is no wonder that the GM would not like this kind of player. If she has hostile players, she should try to figure out a way to not have them be there, which can be awkward in and of itself. Otherwise, she will end up resenting and possibly fighting with the disruptive player, which rarely is good for the rest of the group. I've been in some groups where people, just got in these verbal altercations, and it was awkward, and I did not want to be there, but at the same time, it felt even more awkward to leave, so I just looked somewhere else. It was really awkward. Another possible reason is that she is being required to lead a group for people she simply does not like. Sometimes people get roped into running games, and maybe after a session or two, the GM will realize, I really don't like these people very much. They're kind of demanding, they take me for granted, and these are things I think would add to GM burnout that I've talked about before. Interaction patterns of members and the leader, the players and the GM. One of the most important group dynamics is to observe who talks to whom and how often each player speaks. It is not unusual in the beginning stages of a group for a couple of players to try to dominate it. The GM should be aware of this and alter the pattern by using the various cutting off and drawing out skills, and we'll talk about those later. Sometimes members will get in the habit of talking only to the GM or a select number of players instead of to the entire group. The leader will want to redirect them because that pattern will not lead to maximum group cohesion. And you'll find they use lots of terms that we wouldn't use, but if you think about it for a while, they're kind of interesting. I think a lot of this stuff happens, like a subconscious level. We don't even realize it's going on, but it's something to think about. The GM will want to avoid establishing a pattern in which she responds after each member's comment. And this goes back to the GM overleading, the GM basically micromanaging, I guess. And I think that would add to GM burnout as well. Sometimes it is really best to just shut your trap and let the players talk to one another. Other patterns that the leader wants to look out for are as follows. Members ganging up on another player. Players always discounting each other's suggestions. Players arguing with each other. Those are some suggestions. Silent members may or may not create negative group dynamics. In most groups, participation by all members is desirable. When a player is mostly silent, some of the others may become uncomfortable, especially if this pattern continues for a number of weeks. And I would just urge caution for these kind of players, because I was one of them, I think, at first. And they can break out of it. It might take some time. But in the end, if they become a more, they have better social skills and they interact more, they will really like that group. They will probably feel, more sense of cohesion with everybody, camaraderie, etc. So, don't beat them up too much. It might be something that develops over time. The stage of the group. When observing group dynamics, keep in mind that most groups go through stages of development. In the beginning stage, the dynamics will usually be uncomfortable. members basically feeling each other out, members vying for various leadership roles or attention, and players being cautious. In the middle stages, different dynamics emerge. During each stage, the leader needs to be aware of the different dynamics that lead the group in such a way and basically attend them and make sure they don't get out of hand. Okay, we're going to talk a little bit about group process. Group process refers to the stages of development of a group and the characteristics of each stage. So like the beginning stage, or the first sessions. Naturally, all groups will have a beginning stage. It can last anywhere from 1 to 6 sessions, depending on the kind of group and how the GM runs things, the length of each session, and the makeup of the players. Groups in which the trust level is low to begin with may take as many as 6 sessions to develop some sort of atmosphere and comfort level with each other. Basically, just getting used to each other. It talks a little bit about the middle stage and the closing stage, which is kind of awkward in GMs because if you're closing, that means that the campaign is dying, or maybe the group is dying. So I don't know, I didn't really dwell too much on that one. But it says here, the point is that any leader should be aware of the group process and dynamics that may occur in each of these stages. Certainly the planning of the group will depend in part on the stage of the group. Are you just starting out? Have you been playing games for years? Maybe you just started out and the group's dying already. These are all things to consider. Just some other tips here. Naturally, the leader will want to guard against letting one player dominate, since that would defeat the goal of everyone sharing, cooperating, and it can cause some of the members to withdraw and participate less. The GM must also be alert to the dynamic of members strongly disagreeing with each other. If the leader does not monitor this, the discussion can become a limited debate, with most of the members merely watching. This is where you would have 2 people sort of butting heads, and everyone is basically getting shouted down or silenced because they're going back and forth. Sometimes when you're a GM, it just feels like you're in charge of a kindergartner, kindergarten group, and you really just have to just tell everyone, calm down. This is just a game. Relax. Maybe if it's that heated, maybe even the GM can step in and say, okay, here's another solution you guys aren't thinking of that will, basically calm both of you down. So sometimes you really just have to have some people skills and tell people to take some deep breaths and maybe go outside and take a walk or cool off. Don't you just take a smoke break if they're a smoker, whatever you think would help that situation. The closing of a group can be a very emotional and moving experience for the members. Some may even feel frightened at the thought of losing the group. Because of this, the GM will want to allow plenty of time for terminating a group that's about to end. Maybe as much as 3 sessions if that's possible. But sometimes groups just die, schedules change, you lose your job or your job switches schedules, and it can be tough, especially if you guys have been playing for a while. You have a lot of commitment to that group and you have a lot of fond memories, and it is a sad event. But in my experience, I've had, I don't even know, maybe up to 20 groups have died over the years, and you realize that, yeah, you're going to have some downtime, but eventually you're going to find another group, and with the advent of technology, you could even find groups online if you really can't find any face-to-face groups. Some concluding comments. We discussed group dynamics and the group process that we feel GMs need to be aware of in order to be effective. Group dynamics refers to the attitude and interaction of members and leaders, and such things as the setting for the meetings, the size of the group, the trust, commitment, and goodwill of the members, and the attitude of both players and the GM. Group process describes the stages of the group. We divide the group's evolution into 3 stages: the beginning, middle, and end. Leaders need to be aware of each of these stages and their respective dynamics. Almost all groups will go through 3 stages, but the amount of time spent on any given stage varies according to the kind of group and the needs and personalities of the players and the GM itself. Okay, I'll be going on to the next video, and thanks for watching. Or I guess listening in this case.